You mentioned libraries before, and I wanted to come back to that because I don't picture I don't know what to picture when you think about libraries in biblical times. Can you elaborate on this?
But they had libraries. So one of their famous libraries of history is a library in Egypt. So the north of Egypt is not really that far from Israel, where Jesus was walking and talking, in Judea, in other words. And so there was this city called Alexandria. It still exists today. 220 years before Jesus was born, a guy, a lord, a king, got it in his head that I want to start a big library. And it just grew and grew and grew. And so 48 years before Jesus was born, there was an historian called Aulus Gellius. So in 48 BC, he's writing that the library in Alexandria at that time had 700,000 scrolls.
Wow.
Which we think makes up, maybe we're estimating, about 100,000 different titles. So that's a lot of reading material.
It's not a small library.
It's not a small library. Now that's in Egypt. In Turkey, there's a city called Pergamon. They had a library with about 200,000 scrolls, roughly around that 160 BC. And then Rome in Italy. So obviously Christianity found its way to Italy, hence we have letters to Christians in Rome. We call it the Book of Romans. They had a library there. They had a lot of libraries. But one of the libraries I know about is one built by the Emperor Trajan in AD 112, and they had roughly 20,000 scrolls. So there were libraries everywhere.
And is there evidence that you would have been able to, the common person could have used the librry perhaps like we do today?
Definitely. They talk about how rich and poor were welcome, old and young, and the rich and poor would want to go there. They had cold water plunge pools. They had steam rooms. They had massage rooms.
Wow, I want that kind of library today.
That's right. Right to your Lord Mayor. Hey, look, we're 2,000 years behind the times, guys, And they had gardens you could walk through. Wow. You could listen to an interesting speaker of your choice. At least a couple of the libraries you could actually borrow a book. So we know that about a library in Tibur, Tibur, near not too far from Rome, as far as Australian distances are concerned. And we also know about a library in Athens that lent out at least one book. So we've got this understanding that there were these massive libraries, that people were welcome there.
And how does that impact the topic that we're talking about at the moment?
Yeah, so we're talking about, is it realistic to believe that when Jesus was saying these outlandish things like, I am the way, the truth, the life, no one comes to the Father. In other words, no one gets to go to God in heaven where it's going to be really nice, but through me. Really amazing statement. I would say we've got all the evidence under the sun to say that, yes, he really said that. So what I'm painting is this picture that it was just commonplace for people, not common like today, but there was commonplace to have a variety of people from all walks of life in terms of economic status being able to read and write. There might not have been 80% of poor people who can read and write. There might not have been 80% of rich people who could read and write. But there were people in all these different strata who could read and write. And Jesus, of course, if he is who he said he is, he would have known who was going to be good at remembering. He would have been known who was good at probably taking notes. That's probably why he picked Matthew. Many people think the disciple Matthew was probably the guy. Of course, he had a job in the tax office, and he would have been used to writing quickly and probably spoke several languages.
And if someone were to say to you, John, okay, tell me something, what can I do with those very powerful words, or the implication of them is incredible, what would you encourage them to do?
We talked about how the evidence is that Jesus rose again. He's a living God. He's not just an historical figure. And we believe that he's an intervening God, and he wants to have relationship with people. So he loves us so much that even though we are not particularly good, or never will be particularly good, he still has loved us before we've shown any inclination to love him as we should. And you can talk to him. All you need to do is say, Jesus, I'm going to tell you as it is. I don't even know whether you're there. Help me to learn about you, but help me to know if you're real. You know, we should always speak to Jesus from your heart. If you're in a lot of pain physically, you should tell him, I'm in a lot of pain. I don't like this. If you're in a lot of emotional pain, you can tell him that. If you tell him that, I'd love to meet a Christian. I'd love to have someone who's been down this path for 10 years. I'd love to talk to them. And that's what we really encourage too. If you're thinking about getting right with Jesus, about asking him for forgiveness, then contact someone from Creation Ministries International. Contact a good pastor if you know of one, if you're fortunate enough to live in a place where there's a pastor nearby who's got a great reputation. And read the Bible. It's in so many different languages now. Read the Bible, and when you read it, just each time ask Jesus, help me to understand. Help me to understand. Yeah.
Thank you so much for everything you've shared with us today.
Oh, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I really am, as you can see, I just cut you off. But I am so glad that I can help people to see that Jesus is alive and well. He's changed my life. He's turned me upside down. I want people to see that there's every reason to believe what you're reading is what he said.